Hello, everyone, and welcome to another JoyPac webinar. We're just going to be a few minutes until we're kicking things off because we still have a bunch of people coming in. So yeah, please be patient with us. Vivian, what do you think? Should we do a quick introduction of ourselves before we kick things off?
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah. Hello, everyone. It's Vivian. I'm the Senior Publishing Manager of JoyPac, currently based in Amsterdam. So very welcome to joining our webinar. And today we are going to talk about launching hyper-casual games in China. So back to you,
That's
Falko.
right, yeah. And yeah, I'm Falko. I'm also a Senior Publishing Manager at JoyPac. And yeah, I think it's going to be very interesting because there's stuff that I think most people are familiar with, unless you're like never thought about or just never really considered going to the Chinese market, and it's the first time to kind of think about this stuff because there's some rules and regulations we're going to have to talk about that most people seem to be familiar with. But then there's also a bunch of changes within the last year and maybe even coming up this year. So I think it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, and also launching games in China, and if we should launching game in China has been always a huge topic, right, over years and up to now. So today we are going to share about some of our experiences, and also we're going to answer some couple of developers' questions from the West, and should they and are they suitable for launching games, and how are they going to find the right partner, or should they actually find a partner?
That's right, yeah, and especially with hyper casual, I think that has a interesting different angle on the whole thing because like if you want to bring your mid-core game to China, I would say it's more complicated, but there's like a different process. So I think there's a lot of interesting opportunities for people that have hyper casual games that they maybe don't even consider or like are unsure about how to do that.
Right. I think maybe let's start to tell people why should they actually consider to launching their games to China? How big is the market actually?
Yeah, that's a good idea. I mean, the Chinese mobile market is obviously huge, right? It's a 25 billion US dollar market, predicted to be even bigger than this year. And I don't have that was even like 2019 numbers. So last year was huge as well. Of course, the whole lockdown thing played into that. And while you could say like, yeah, most of that is mid-core games or stuff like that, but you need this environment for hyper casual, right? Because you need somebody to advertise in your games other than other hyper casual games. So it's pretty good. And there's a bunch of phones out there, right, on both platforms.
Yeah, actually, for the Chinese market, we are talking about both Android market and the iOS market, and both are very different. And how about the iOS market, Falko, in the Chinese market?
Yeah, we're gonna talk about like both separate markets in a little bit of detail later, but just for like general size to give people an idea, we're talking about over roughly around 200 million iOS users in China. And that is dwarfed by the number of Android users, which is over 500 million users. 550 million, I think, is the latest data that I saw. So it's a huge market, just like size-wise. And you might think like, yeah, but it's China, like maybe people have less income to spend in games and stuff like that, which is not necessarily true. And I'm gonna talk a little bit, especially with the iOS market a little bit later on. But how about hyper casual in China? What do you think, like how it's going there?
It wasn't that popular if you are comparing with the US top chat and the Chinese top chat. And in Chinese market, there are a lot of like mid-core, like role-playing kind of a game, right? Time management kind of a game. But recently, we've seen a lot of hyper-casual game also climbed to the top chat in China. Having said that, then it's obviously our opportunity to try more and also do something different and test more in Chinese market for the hyper casual games.
Definitely, yeah, it's an up and coming market for hyper casual. While like a year or two ago, we saw like one hyper casual game here or there. It's not like that
Exactly.
anymore. It's not like in the West where if you look at the top downloads chart, like 9 out of 10 games will be hyper casual ideally, and then the mid-core is like taking the top grossing region. In China, you still see a lot of like mid-core and normal casual games in the download charts. But I would say about 25% of games that I see now in the top 20, top 30 are hyper casual games. So yeah, they're doing good downloads. There are a lot of downloads, and the genre is becoming more popular both with players but also with developers, and we're going to talk a little bit about that as well a bit later on.
Yeah, you do see a lot of actually a lot of Western developers game are actually in the top chat in China nowadays over these 25% actually, and it's very interesting. And who's behind that, and how are they doing?
Yeah,
So
for sure, and
yeah,
it's that's on our list for sure. Yeah, I mean, let's look at the two platforms separately. But before we start off with that, I want to start a quick poll here. We would like to know why people are here and listening to us in the webinar. 62 people right now, I can see. So it's a good opportunity to get a little bit of an overview of who we have here. So there should be a
yeah.
poll appearing on your screen now. So I would be extremely happy if everybody could click why they are joining this webinar. If you just want to publish your game in China, if you already has published a game in China, but you weren't really, you want to know a little bit more, want to be a bit more successful with that. If you're just curious about it, let us know. And I see answers coming in. So there's a lot of people that are just in general curious about the Chinese market, which is pretty cool. And I think like in every section of our conversation, there will be a little bit for you. We're trying to not info dump everything on you in the beginning.
Yeah, we
So
can go
I think,
more general and also starting from like very basic thing because a lot of people are actually just curious about it, meaning that maybe they haven't experienced it yet, and maybe they just want to know more and try their first game.
yeah, that's right. But a
Yeah,
third of people here also want to publish their game in China. So I think that will be
they are
very,
ready.
hopefully very valuable for them. All right, let's
Yeah.
close the poll here and move on with our first market, the iOS market, which I think is both interestingly familiar and similar to the West, but also very different, right?
Totally, totally. And also, I think here it's worth to mention, like in the Chinese market, for the iPhone holders, there are more than 230 million users who are actually having the iPhone in China, which is actually doubled than US. So I think it worth to mention, like also the that's also one of the reasons that why Chinese market is a huge potential as well.
That's right. And but it's also not as different as people would think, right? We're gonna come to
Mhm.
Android and how complicated Android is in a little bit here. But for
Right.
iOS, everything kind of goes through the App Store, right? Um, I know we said here on the screen that jailbroken devices are not as common anymore. I remember the day where when you bought an iPhone in China around the iPhone 3, 4 era, you bought it and got cracked right away at the store where you bought it, right? But you don't
Yeah.
really see that often anymore. No alternative app stores. No, I remember jailbreak betas where only people with jailbroken devices can participate. Um, yeah, what do you think about that? Like, is that the security of Apple going up, or do you still know a lot of people that have their devices jailbroken?
I don't I don't think it's much differences than the people who's using the iPhone at the West, though,
Hmm.
because a lot of, I mean, Apple Store is still very straightforward everywhere, although they're trying to apply some local regulations everywhere, but still, as of the devices itself, I don't think so. Have you ever heard any? Because actually, I'm not really using. I didn't get my iOS device in China though, so I'm not pretty sure about this.
Yeah,
Have you
no,
ever heard anything?
Same here. I don't know anybody in China now that has like jailbroken device, and that used to be super common. So there were a lot of alternative kind of like user acquisition methods to get people
Right.
to just install the files right away. Maybe that's also partially why that and the value of the devices, I think, why the iOS market is so strong and interesting, even compared to the US on a user by user level, right?
Yeah.
When I talk to people, they all think like, oh, in China, you're going to get like a fraction of the amount of money from in-app purchases or ads. But that's not really what we're seeing at JoyPac. I would say for us, it's pretty similar. On the most case, almost directly equal. I think from interstitials, we see eCPMs as low as $15, but then usually up, and on the rewarded ad side, it can go up to $35, no problem.
Right. And I also remember that we actually compared with some ARPU with US market and the Chinese market. Actually, some of the ARPU is even higher in China than US market, right? With the same game.
Yeah, I that was super surprising for me when I first started going into the
Same
Chinese market,
here.
because it's a lot of users, right? As you mentioned, it's more users than iOS users in the US. So it's interesting that it's kind of not considered as important by a lot of people, although we're going to talk a little bit about the differences later and the challenges why it's usually not the first on people's list, going to China over the North American market.
Right.
Let's look at Android though. Very different, right?
Totally different, and you will be actually surprised for the Android users in Chinese market are more than 700 millions, which means more than 700 million users in China are having the Android device in their hands. So having said that, again, if you compare with that numbers to US, it's also doubled.
Yeah, but the market is very different, right? I mean, Android is a bit
Totally.
of an interesting bag in China, because you'll have the whole range of affordability. So you have high-end devices like the Samsung phones and the recent Huawei and Xiaomi phones, but you
Yeah.
also have the super budget line, right? Where for $50 you can go out and get a
Oppo,
smartphone.
Vivo, yeah, these days
Yeah.
are all coming up, and their surprisingly their quality is just really good.
Yeah,
Um,
but even if you're like barely have any money, I think there's an Android phone option in China that pretty much everybody
Definitely.
can afford. So you'll see a lot of Android products. The problem though is there's not a Google Play Store that people can go to, right?
No, that's also why it's been very difficult for a lot of, I think even for a lot of Chinese publisher, it's not an easy thing to reach out to all the local store and channels, because a lot of channels you need to do a different SDK and a different connect in, and also most of those local store you need to get feature spots to be able to let your game be visible and let it shine, and also you need to be on at least like 8 stores to go over like cover almost like 90% of the Chinese Android market.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
that
The
is
the number
difficult.
of stores is what confused me in the beginning, because it's not like every phone comes with Google Play and then you have a couple people that maybe install an Amazon store. But it's
True,
every different provider of phones usually has their own store pre-installed, and then you have these major stores like Tencent stores or the Qihoo 360 store, that
totally.
millions of people are using, and they are all completely separate. They have different account managers you have to talk to. Often you can't even do UA for or monetization with games that are not within that store, right? So you always have to stay in
Yeah,
this environment of that store. So it's fragmented down into, I don't know what the last number is. There were like nearly 50 stores the last time I checked that at least have some users in them.
more
Um,
now.
yeah,
Yeah,
but the top 10 is kind of like where you want to be at, or almost the top 10 to cover
definitely.
most of the people, right?
Yeah, definitely. But Falco, the good thing is I learned recently for the Android market in terms of the monetization as well as the iOS market, right, in China. Previously, the monetization ECPM isn't that great, and that's why, based on so many users, maybe a lot of gamer didn't, especially for ads monetization, it didn't make a lot of money, and the return ROI wise, it doesn't make that much sense. But however, the last 1 year, especially the recent couple of months, maybe it's the pandemic or whatsoever, I see a huge increasement of the ads spent, and also ECPM is going extremely like, I wouldn't say like going like a rocket, but it's really impressive. And sometimes we noticed some of our Android game actually in China monetize even slightly better than the iOS. So that is very interesting point.
Right, right. But you need the mass of people as well for that, right? You
Definitely.
say there's a lot of like, there's a big jump, but of course, compared to iOS on a per user basis, it's still like, I don't want to give people false hopes here. It's still a tiny fraction of it. But then, yeah, as you said, you
Definitely.
have like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of devices out there. So
Mhm.
that way you can get to equal numbers if you really have a hit game that kind of goes viral and you really figure out those different channels in China. So it can be very popular and very successful for you, but you really have to look at what you're doing. It's not that you just put it in the main store like on iOS and then do some UA around it. And I think what you said about ECPMs and stuff going higher, I think that is also one of the reasons why we see hyper casual being more successful in China these days, because you have these
Definitely.
rising CPIs. So we're going through the same thing that we did in the Western market, where people are looking for, okay, what games do still really have those super low CPIs? How can we get a lot of people into those games, which is basically what helped hyper casual take off in the West, right? Because they were so much cheaper to advertise. And yeah, in China we had the same kind of nice environment for a while, but it's changing recently.
But Falco, in terms of the type of the games, do you have any suggestion to the developers out there? What type of a game are there? Any specific genres and type of the game that's suitable to go to Chinese market or go to Android market even?
Yeah, I think it's most in the hyper casual. I actually want to get back to that a little bit later, because I want to start with like a bigger hurdle that people have before they even choose what is the right game, is to like, how do I even get into the market?
Right.
Because all that people are telling me is, oh, the legal situation is confusing, it's so difficult. How do I
Yeah, same
go
here.
about it? Can you talk a little bit about how the ISBN number works,
Yeah,
how
so
that process is?
obviously, yeah. Obviously, the last couple of weeks, months, even like last year, it's been always a huge topic. The IBAN numbers certificate, basically in China, even for iOS, so Apple Store, it also requires to apply this certificate. So a lot of developers, especially at the West, they're a little bit panic and reaching out to me and saying like, hey, can you help us with that? I said, yeah, sure. And first of all, for hyper casual game, I would say a lot of you have to also evaluate, does it make sense, or does it worth the effort to apply or go through all this document? It's not difficult, especially for if you have an entity in China. It takes less than 3 months. Otherwise, for a foreign West company, it takes a little bit longer, which might be like 6 months or so. And yeah, if basically if you find a partner, it makes things a lot easier, because partner can help you go through those paperwork. But I always also suggest a lot of developer to evaluate and see if it's if we can redesign it to other way to monetize it instead of IAP. Or otherwise, we can always hide it first and then launch the game in China and slowly waiting for the event number to come back on our table so that we can slightly bring up the IAP in the game.
That's right. Yeah. Like maybe to take a step back for people that have never heard about it. When you want to sell a product in China, any kind of media product, you need this kind of like approval from the government. And this process, as Vivian said, can take months and months and months, like 6 to 8 months seems to be very, very normal for a lot of people. But right now it only applies to things when you try to sell these. So technically it's only limited to games that have in-app purchases in them. Because they fall into that definition. So hyper casual games kind of skirt around that a little bit by not having that. And there was kind of like a way around in general on iOS until like mid last year. It was the rule for iOS, but nobody, including Apple, kind of stuck to it, right? So you could still do it, and then it changed. So now basically you have to remove any in-app purchase you have if you want to get your hyper casual out quick. And to be honest, and with a hyper casual game, 6 months down the road, the market might look very different. You might have a lot of problems putting it out. So it's a long time to wait. I heard rumors that the Chinese government might look into limiting this for ad monetized games as well, though. Have you heard anything about that, or just in general, do you think that's something that could happen?
As you mentioned, rumor, I think there hasn't any like official announcement into that. Although I won't be surprised later on, but I don't think it's so quick, you know.
Yeah, I think so too. We have at least a couple of months, but it could fit into the history of those regulations that we've been seeing, right? Because I think before 2016, 15 maybe, we didn't have this regulation at all, and then it got tighter and tighter and tighter. So I can very much imagine that they're looking into that. But there are also other licenses, right? Like some of them you can get as a foreign company, some of them you can get through like agencies, and for some you just need to be a Chinese company, right? You have these, I would say, 3 levels: the do-it-yourself level, the having like a partner agency, and then having a full-out publisher that like gets all those licenses. Do you have an opinion about these? I mean, of course, we're a publisher, so we have a bit of a favorite there. But what do you think? Like, how viable is self-publishing, or just getting like an agency on paper partner in China? Do you have an opinion?
Right. So basically, as you mentioned, you know, for JoyPac case, of course, we have this luxury that we actually have the Chinese company over there in Beijing. So as the China, we are applying it through our Chinese entity. So it's being considered as a Chinese company applying to this certificates or license or so on. However, to a foreign company, it's not impossible. Basically, you can find an agent over there, and they can help you go through. But again, you know, you need to find the right one and the trustworthy one, and also you will be able to prepare all those papers through basically yourself and submitting it together with the agency, and it definitely takes longer, which is around 6 months, I remember.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, it's really like how big as a company are you? If you're Voodoo, then you can probably figure it out, and then can get most of the stuff out there after a while. But if you're just even a medium-sized publisher, it will take you so much time and work, and you still might leave a lot of money on the table. Like just being out in China is something that I think is relatively achievable for hyper casual developers, but then you don't advertise to the right people, you don't have the right networks integrated both for monetization and UA, and I think you just leave a lot of money on the table. And that's then kind of up to each individual company to say like, okay, how much more can I get to working with a partner? Because of course, the partner will take their share as well. So, but usually that's an uplift that is very well worth it. So, I mean, let's say we're in a 50-50 scenario or something like that. Generally, a good Chinese publisher will be able to way more than double the income that a game would make in China, at least from our experience.
Yeah, exactly.
And our
So,
UA team in China, that told
no,
me there are also some networks that will only work with companies registered in China, right? And so are some
right.
of
I
the
was
Android app
about to
stores.
mention that as well. So basically, for a lot of, for example, like TikTok, and which is a Total over there in Chinese market, and they can, well, they have some special regulations to work with Chinese local companies, publishers directly, while having different restrictions, exclusivities. Working with a lot of foreign companies. So basically, it obviously makes it easier when you have a Chinese office there and you have a local partners there, then they can have a direct contact person. And also the benefit of it is also that they can also help you to optimize it better and choose the maximize your value the most.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, let's talk about like how the hyper casual space looks like locally. I would say most of the games that I see high in the charts when it comes to hyper casual games, not for mid-core games, completely different, but for hyper casual
Yeah,
games, most of the games we're seeing are still Western developed, right? Which is can be pretty
totally.
surprising if you're looking at the iOS charts in China, for example, and you see all the Voodoo and Zynga games up there.
Totally. And I also noticed that basically all the West developers, actually, hyper casual games sort of started from the West, isn't it? And
Yeah.
also that slowly people are actually for the Chinese local users, they are slowly learning, hey, there's a hyper casual games out there, right? And then they start to take it, and also being like a snackable game, and playing it along with their mid-core and hardcore game at their free time. And in China, most of the cities are very busy. On the way in the metro or something, you see everyone almost 99% of them are looking at their phones. And I also have you noticed, Falko, when you're in China, a lot of them are actually using bigger screens, right? While here at the West, a lot of people are thinking, maybe medium size is good, handy, to hold or put in a pocket or something. But in China or in Asia, relatively, they are using bigger screens, so they can really rely on their, leisure time on the phone, basically.
That's true. Yeah, you see a lot of like bigger phablets, kind of like, or
Yeah, even
smaller tablets with
tablets,
phone functionalities. Yeah, you see that a lot more, and the local providers have a lot more options to that. Yeah, I
right?
think for hyper casual, one of the reasons why we're seeing so many Western games is that Western companies just have a head start on that, right? We started making
Yeah,
those games in the West a while ago, and it's just becoming more and more popular with the local developers as well, as there are more publishers that not only looking for games developed in the West, but also locally, because there is a little bit about local taste, I think. I saw in my research for this, I saw that I think 86% of Chinese players, maybe it was only 82, said that they prefer games developed by local companies, by Chinese companies. That might be because of just national pride or bias, or just because they prefer how those games are made, right? So
yeah. I think it's relatively easier for the Chinese gamer users to recognize those characters and also sort of a gameplay.
yeah, and we're now seeing that in hyper casual a little bit as well. I mean, the advantage of hyper casual is that most of these things are very relatable, right? If we look at a lot of
Right.
Lions games, for example, the peeling fruit is something that is just inherently understandable. But there are some some elements that are just more relatable, a little bit closer to home for an Asian audience. And after this slide, I have a little example of one of our games for this as well. But I feel that is something that you see a lot now, where you see kind of like a mix of mechanics that were already popular in the West a while ago in hyper casual, mixed with more local kind of visuals or stories or settings. What I'm always getting asked by developers is like, oh, if the Chinese market is so big, then I should make a game for China, right? It's the year of the ox. Let me design a game specifically for that. What do you think about this approach of like, as a Western developer, making a game specifically for the Asian market?
Yeah, but basically, as you mentioned before, right? So a lot of, especially for hyper casual game, in the top chat in Chinese market, and nowadays you don't see many very Asian or very Chinese culturalized games, anyways, and that is also because of the beauty of hyper casual games. It's very accessible and also like related to the regular life, and it's not like a hardcore game that you really have to know specific story and also even some series before, right? So it's really like I think it's very easy for a user to understand and accept, and I would encourage all the developer to stick with their creation, their dream, and their idea, and what they're passion for, and so that to create a very nice and playful game. That's the most important thing to me. How about you, Falko?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. You're like just focusing on a market that is not your own, that where you're not culturally embedded, is a huge risk, especially now where people starting to make those games, right? Where you have the local developers that really know what they're talking about because they lived there their whole life.
Totally.
And then you might lock
Nuance
yourself
of
out.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but at the same time, you might lock yourself out of your home market, right? If you're saying like, hey, I'm only
totally.
aiming at the Asian market, and then suddenly you have tough competition there. It's usually better to, just as you said, look at something that is more holistically, something that can work in Asia, but it's not necessarily aimed only at that. Because right now the experience with the genre is still on the Western developers side. The Asian developers, I think, will eventually catch up to it and then start making games that are also for everybody, because they also want to grow out of their home market eventually. But at the moment, we see that Western developers have a little bit more experience, a little bit higher quality output when it comes to hyper casual. So yeah, it would be stupid to not use that. I mentioned that we have an example from our own list of games for this, to kind of show what's going on in the Asian market. So I want to show Tofu Girl from our partner Usaya in Japan. Very big hit for us. We have over 26 million downloads on the game, and it's a pretty simple game, right? Like if you just look at the game mechanics, at least. Yeah, it's for people unfamiliar, it's a typical tower jump game where elements are sliding in from the sides, and you have to jump at the right timing. But the difference here is it's a cute 2D graphics, lots of costumes to collect for the character, but also it's based on tofu, right? So the stuff that gets stacked is not just a generic 3D object or something more familiar with for Western people, but tofu, which, I mean, yes, people know about tofu in the West these days, but it's not as integrated into everybody's daily life as it is in Asia. And we definitely see that in the download numbers. So over 80% of the downloads we have for the game are from the Asian region, mostly China, but not exclusively. Yeah, what do you think though? It's not that these games are super simple, right? Like even in Tofu Girl, we see more meta features and like the, I would say, evolution of the hyper casual genre, right? You don't go out and make a game that is just like a 5-year-old Western hyper casual game.
No, exactly. So basically, for Tofu Girl, it's basically also a stacking kind of mechanics, gameplay, and also of course, the game itself coming from a Japanese developer, obviously they you can see the theme and also the graphic is slightly towards like an Asian style. But the good thing is they didn't apply a very specific Asian IP or very detailed Asian graphics. Having said that, and I always encourage our developers out there to use abstract and simple graphic when it's coming to the hyper casual game development, because these days it's relatively easy for us to develop a prototype and test it earlier, so that you don't have to put a lot of effort beforehand. But also, I think for a lot of hyper casual users, they are very familiar with this kind of art style, and also, like the general hyper casual gameplay. So I think we shouldn't really stick with specific cartoonization style, but also try to go with the majority hyper casual gameplay.
Yeah, I think that's pretty interesting, because it's like you want something that is inviting enough to everybody. If you're too specific, then people might not be into that, right? But if you're too generic, then you also don't really stick out. So characters are a must in Asia even more than in the West. But then there's this completely separate style of like cute-ish 2D that I would say is a generic art style in Asia that will work in many countries there for many peoples, but not really in the West, right? Like we see that in Tofu Girl, that this art style specifically, and a lot of the cultural things that are hinted at the game, going down to the costumes that you can collect, right? If you get this little suit that a company worker would wear in China, Korea, Japan, has a much different impact there. So it's interesting to me that there's a whole other thing that can be considered generic or open enough that would, from our side, from my view as a Westerner, is like, oh, this is a very specific art style. But that's not necessarily always the case.
Yeah, true.
But there is a little bit of localization going on. So I want to go to that. I wouldn't compare it to mid-core games, right? In mid-core games, we see complete redesigns of menus where it's a lot of like very content forward. People want to see the depth of content in the games, and complete rearrangements and color schemes and stuff. But there are a few things that people can do in hyper casual as well, right? What would you say is like the absolute minimum on localization that you have to do to enter the Chinese market?
I think recently we faced, for example, like the blood color. For example, in the Chinese market, also to the ads network, they don't approve basically to use the splashing blood as red color. Maybe you can change it to blue color or something like that. So it's less, how do you say, straightforward. That's just something, I think also because the hyper casual game, the accessibility is super easy. Might be to a younger audience, because it's free to download and, watch ads to, acquire more users. So that's one of the things I recently faced.
Yeah, that's right. I think there are like a couple of just no-go topics where I wouldn't even go there. And violence, unless it's very cartoonized and very like slimmed down stuff that we would consider as still being okay for everybody in the West, is not necessarily the same in China. And then topics you would probably anyway try to avoid for a hyper casual games, like politics or religion and stuff like that could be difficult to get through there in China. And when it comes to translating text in hyper casual, of course, you have an advantage there, right? Because usually we have maybe 50 words in hyper casual games, but there are a subsection of words of games that have a bigger problem. And we just experienced that with one of our own games, ABC Runner, which is doing very well for us in the Western market. However, language-based games, not really a way to localize those into Chinese, huh?
Yeah, I think for purely language-based kind of a game, it's very hard to localize to the Chinese version. However, I think due to our ABC Runner, I still do see some users from China are actually liking these ABC Runners, right? Because the average how do you say, education nowadays, and also globalization, everyone being online and so on, the new generation really picks up. So I do see a kind of, also because of educational purpose, right? So that
Yeah.
can be another popular genre. Who knows?
Yeah, I would call it the niche for now, but you're right. It's
Yeah,
not like if you you shouldn't put your game out in the Chinese store, especially if it's already without any in-app purchases and if there are no extra steps, just to have it available. You might be surprised. But of course, if you have something that is very heavily based on the alphabet, it will be interesting to like a subsection of users, unless it's something that can be changed into Chinese. And then as a last point, maybe I want to point out, and that's why I have the icons here. Those are from Zynga's High Heels game. That is the Western icon and the Chinese icon at the same day, I think 2-3 days ago, when I got those. Very
Chinese New
different
Year
ones.
time.
Exactly, Chinese New Year time. There's a little bit that you can do around local events, right? Like what you would do with Christmas maybe in the West. There are
Right.
a couple of events that are good for us, both in like people are more engaged with the games because of some kind of in-game event, but also when it comes to acquiring new users because everybody's on holiday, right?
Yeah, totally. So also during the Chinese New Year time, actually officially we do have like a 2 weeks holiday for the Chinese New Year, and that's one of the actually it is the biggest holiday for Chinese people. So it is a kind of eye-catching and a good moment to do something out there.
Right. Yeah. Everybody's home for a week at least, maybe two. So
Yeah,
definitely interesting. Everybody's on their phones. All right, we're running out of time here, so let's go. Let's speed up a little bit. We
another
have
poll.
another poll ready because we're going to talk a little bit about FAQ. What do we usually as a publisher hear as questions from developers? And of course, we're interested in what is most important for the people that are attending um, our webinar when it comes to like working with Chinese publishers. Like, what are you looking for most? Not necessarily the only thing. Of course, you need the right combination, but what is kind of like like an overall kind of top thing that you want to make sure that gives you a better feeling about the whole partnership? We see a lot of answers coming in. Right now, very interestingly, transparency is leading quite a bit with 67%,
Wow.
while
Yeah, I've
hands-free,
heard a lot as well.
while hands-free, a partner takes care of everything is still pretty high with like 40% of people that click that. And then minimum guarantee upfront payment doesn't seem to be the most important part. So it's that's interesting because I feel that used to be very different because there was a time where people didn't really trust Chinese publishers, right? And what they kind of wanted is get some money out of it in the beginning, and then they were like, I'm probably never going to see anything other than this. But now
Yeah,
people seem to be looking for something else, a little bit more in-depth partnership where they see more what's going on in the market. Interesting. Is that
right.
what your experience is as well? You mentioned, right, when developers want
Totally.
to.
Yeah, I think first of all is the transparency, obviously, and second is really that as you can see is from the first poll, it's really like a lot of people doesn't really have the experience, right? So they are really curious, and maybe they haven't really even released a game in China, so they just want to get like a full service help from some
Hmm.
partners or some local offices.
Yeah, especially like I heard that from some mid-sized publishers as well, because they're like, hey, if we partner up with somebody there, like we don't want to deal with it, right? That's the main reason why we're
True.
partnering up with somebody, not because we couldn't, like if we put all the work into it, we probably could, but yeah, we'd rather not. That's at least what I hear a lot. Let's go
Right.
through a couple of the main questions that we're hearing from developers. You collected a few of these before.
Mhm.
And how do I choose the right publisher for my games in China is probably the biggest one. I hear it every kind of like ask me anything conference panel or something like that, right? What would you say how to approach
Totally.
this?
Yeah, today I'm going to basically, standing from the developer's side, okay? So because I was also at the developer's side previously, and also obviously, to check the reference of the publisher or partner's reputation is very important. And ask around, ask your partner, and also check with your account manager or contact person, can you show me the examples of the games and who are your partners right now, and what are the roughly result out there, So then you will have a kind of expectation, and also kind of like a balloon, reference out there.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Like checking who they're already working with and contacting those people can be extremely insightful. I always recommend to talk at least to 2 or 3 partners, because
Totally.
every developer had a bad had that publisher they had a bad experience with, or the other way around. The publisher can have 5, 6 great partnerships with developers, but sometimes it just doesn't really click, and it gets complicated for some reason. So you might get one that is like praising a publisher and saying they're super awesome, but then everybody else had a bad experience, or the other way around, where you'd only talk to the one that had a bad experience, but actually there's a high likelihood of you actually being very happy in a fruitful kind of partnership with that publisher.
Yeah. Totally. I think it has to do, beside the reference and the reputation wise, I think I'm sure a lot of publishers are capable to do that, but also there is a little bit of timing, and also there is a little bit of the resources they can potentially, allocate that for you. So
Mm.
also the next one is I would suggest to developer also check what kind of team setting out there, and can they actually potentially help you to change some minor things in the game, or like a sort of like a product design sort of advisory thing, or are they only doing the UA or monetization for you?
Yeah, that's right. Trying to find out like what is the team that will be responsible for my game, not only the people that I will be in contact with, but also the people that will work on it, right? Is it worth it to kind of like open my source code up to my publishing partner there, not only to put in SDKs, but really do these special events and special content for the market that can really push you over the top there, right? That can be difficult to
Right.
kind of assess when you're just getting to know a partner, but something you should ask about, like, hey, how does the team look like? Who am I going to talk to? How's the cooperation with the team? Then how about new content? Are we doing this? Are we doing that together? I think that's very important questions to ask. Yeah, for sure.
Definitely. Oh, sorry. And also, last but not least point from the last question. Also, I think it's very important also to ask your potential publisher what type of a game are they actually looking for, and what type of the game are they focusing on right at this time. As I mentioned, the timing thing, right?
Yeah,
Because
that's right.
a lot of good publishers, they are shifting around their strategy, which is very normal in the gaming industry. So I think it's very worth to ask your contact person, a publishing manager, like, hey, what kind of a game are you actually, looking for these days,
That's
in the
that's a good
last half
point.
year, right?
Yeah, very good point, because I get it both ways, where sometimes people don't show me games because they think I'm not interested in them, while we're actually doing kind of like a shift to look into those games more and investing heavily into, I don't know, can be regular casual games or idle games, or really depends on the publisher, but it will change. So even if you have a feeling like this is not exactly what the publisher is doing right now from the games that I see on App Annie or Sensor Tower on the website, you should still kind of like reach out to the publisher and ask like, hey, would this be interesting to you? And then they're usually pretty straightforward. We'll ask you like, hey, yeah, let's talk about it a bit more, or no, that's not really our kind of genre. So transparency is also one of the things, right? Like that, this is, as we just learned, the most important part to most of our attendees here. Like, how do you check if you as a developer, in this case, you're embodying the developer, how would you check about would you go about checking how transparent a publisher is? What kind of questions do you think are the best to ask? What should your expectation be?
Yeah, a lot of developers out there is very cute and also very focused on their development, right? So don't be shy. Why don't you just ask them if I'm going to work with you, publisher, and how are you going to show me the transparency? And for example, do you have a dashboard? How do you reporting your monthly reference and also monthly data? And are you going to have regular meetings with me to give me some update about what you are doing with my games, because it's my game? And also, where can I actually reach out to you guys? So like pinning you guys on Slack, or are we going to share a same channel or something like that? Am I able to reach out to account manager regularly, and also perhaps maybe UA manager out there, to check constantly about the market and so on, and also post-production team if they ever change something out there, any influence and impact out there. So why don't you just ask directly? I would say, don't be shy and ask straightforward, and before you go into a further status with this partner.
Yeah, very interesting mix of because sometimes it's hard to tell before you start working with somebody, where you have to know what to ask for and then kind of get a feeling for it. Like you said, like what is our main communication channel? Are there regular update meetings and so on? Like who are my contact people? But then also that is something that you can maybe learn from talking to other developers that already partnered with the publisher. Like, hey, how's communication for you guys? What tools do they use? How visible is the information that you get? Of course, there's some NDAs in place usually, so they won't be able to share exact like numbers or reports, or they don't want to. But they will will be able to give you a good feeling of like, yeah, this is kind of what you will expect. Let's move on to the next question here. Anything to paying attention to when signing a contract? Also something that, yeah, also something where you can kind of work in some of the transparency things to be sure that you're actually getting them, right?
Yeah, and I found actually when I'm coming to this JoyPac publishing manager role, I'm actually acting as a publisher, right? So I find like a lot of developers are super smart. When I reach out to them or when they connected to me and they were like, hey, can we actually just share some sort of a general template or general terms and a condition before we go through everything? Because, at least from the testing phases, some developer might already preparing the build and also implementing some sort of tracking or stuff, minor things, but still some effort, right? And the communication costs time as well. So I think I will always, and at least I don't really mind to share some general terms with this potential partner, because I always believe, a good partnership should be definitely based on the mutual benefits. How about you, Falko?
Definitely, yeah. It's I think that is just easier in the hyper casual market. You generally have more games, more people that have been in contact with more companies, so you get a better overview of what publishers are offering. And I would say that it's not exactly the same, but there is kind of like a fairly reliable market of those are just the terms you get offered, and then they get a little bit worse the bigger the partner is. But this is like a potential trade-off to a bigger marketing machine or whatever. So there's finding the right balance, also from talking to other people as much as they can share about this, or just asking the publisher, as you said, right away. Usually people are very open and have kind of like standardized at least a base set of deal terms, and then you can usually negotiate a little bit around that. I wouldn't say you can get everything better overall, but you can have a little bit of a give and take, maybe a bit higher share for a little bit less somewhere else, or a little bit lower share, but then very big guarantees if you're more aiming at getting visibility in the market, maybe with players or other partners, or for your company overall, right? I think there's some wiggle room, but most people will be able to like provide you a base set of deal terms in the first or second conversation, most likely.
Yeah, totally agree.
Cool. Yeah, there are a couple other things in this FAQ. Do we need to adapt the game to the culture? I think we answered that already mostly. Yeah, so not really. Just keep it as open as possible, but your partner will definitely be able to help you. Not every partner, of course. It depends a bit on how fully fleshed the publisher is that you partner with. At JoyPac, for example, we do have an engineering team that can work on the games directly, but maybe you want to keep control a little bit more, and you work more with an agency or more UA focused partner. In that case, then yeah, you have to be a bit careful about like what you do there. And then, is it common to offer an MG or upfront payment in China? What would you say?
I think depends on the games previously and now. I think previously, like some mid-core and hardcore game, because it takes a lot of effort and the time and the investment to develop the game. And when you're handing in the source or handing the game or even IP to your partners, then of course I would say, you know, some minimum guarantee and upfront payment could show some you know, sincerity out there with your partner. However, for hyper casual games, I don't see much, and also I also didn't, as you can see that from the poll, I don't think a lot of developers out there are asking like it's mandatory to have a minimum guarantee or upfront payment, because hyper casual game is kind of straightforward after you test a game, right? If your partner is sharing the transparency data with you, and we can already sort of make a calculation out there. And if we share that with you, and if we both agree on that, and then that's pretty much what you are going to get.
Yeah, I agree for the most part. I think there's other things that should be higher on the list when first working with a partner in China. It's getting the transparency kind of guaranteed, getting maybe a guaranteed minimum of UA that will be done, or some way to get your game back if it doesn't work out, that you're not stuck in a contract with a publisher that maybe launches 5 games every week and then loses focus of your game. You maybe want to have a second chance with that. I would say the only exception is when you already have a big success in the West, when you already have kind of like a chart topping game or like a very high ranking game in the West, then you can maybe have some higher expectations from your Chinese partner as well. And then they're usually also more open because the markets are similar enough that a game will be pre-vetted by being successful in the Western market, and then maybe there's a small UA test in China to confirm that it will perform similarly, and then you can maybe ask for some upfront guarantees there.
Totally, and at the end of the day, it's about your game, right? And basically, we couldn't really give out more than what it is. So testing is the first thing. Well. Right. Last but not least, we're going to do some sales pitch here.
Yeah, exactly. We're the webinar part is officially over when it comes to the time that we have, but we do have a little bit to talk about, because if you're now interested, right, then yeah, JoyPac is of course one of the potential partners. Do you want to talk people a little bit through like what we did in the past and what is the attractive parts of working with JoyPac?
Right. So here, I only put like a few examples here that JoyPac actually helped the Western developer to publish their game to China. And we worked with Quali and Panadis. Quali is actually a publisher, right? Everyone knows. And basically, they were not familiar with the Chinese market, and then we helped them to go to China at that time. And also, Panadis is a developer, a pure developer. Actually, for example, the Gyrosphere, we actually generated nearly 3 million downloads out there. And also for Outman is a Danish developer, Setsnil. And for this game, we generated around 6 million downloads overall in China. So which is pretty good, and developers are pretty happy with working with us. And also Chainworks are also one of the very leading self-publishing developer in the Netherlands. We helped them to bring their Power Panther out there in China, and generated a quite impressive revenues out there. And also very important thing for Champworks is that like self-publishing developers, they might not have the hands to basically release a game and localize the game in another specific Asian market, right? And the Super Plus, we helped them to release their Hills of Steel. For this game, the experience was also they are doing pretty good in the Western market. And then they were asking like if we can potentially also bring this game to China, and it's also their first try. And so far, we all very happy with all the result here. So yeah, and many more developers and publishers out there. So it's too small to put all of them here.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Like there's a wide range, right? A wide range of how we can work with partners, and working with a different range of partners as well, from small studios that want to keep most of the self-publishing in-house, but also don't really want to hire people specifically for these difficult markets. So for those, it's great. For mid-sized publishers that are just like more focused on the Western markets and expect a bit more kind of like a big professional partner that is performing as well as they would, at least in Asia. We have stuff that is specifically for China only, but Altman, for example, is one where we co-funded and published the game globally as well. So that's something that we're doing more and more. We had the Hyperfuel program that we announced a while ago, really working with developers from like the prototype stage on. And we're very happy to see ABC Runner, for example, that is still high in the charts in the US, that came out of this partnership. So there's a whole range of different kind of ways that we like to cooperate with developers. So yeah, basically we're asking everyone that is interested in this, maybe just talking more, to reach out to us. And we're happy to talk to everyone around this. We do have a full team in the Western office. So the two of us, we're based in Europe, but we're not the only ones, right? We have some local UA specialists as well. We have some general brand marketing here. There are contact people here. So I think that is something that might be interesting for people that are a bit more worried about time zone or communication challenges that they might have with Chinese partners, right? This is a common issue that we're seeing, both language but also culturally. What do you think?
Yeah, exactly. So basically, communication is another most important thing coming to choosing a partner to work with, and especially nowadays, so we can't really meet each other. But we are at your time zone and even speak your language. For example, Falko English and German, and I speak English and the Chinese, and of course the Kleinbeige and Nederlands. So, and here also we have Danish UA manager, and also Ukrainian, and many more languages to cover your language, your culture. And also both Falko and I are working in this gaming industry more than 10 years. We definitely understand your point and understand the market and speaking your term and the language. So I think it's a whole bunch of advantages out there.
Yeah, as you mentioned before, we both spend time on the developer side as well, so we're trying to anticipate, of course, what are the questions and like what is important to a developer. But yeah, we're always happy to talk about this more. Before we wrap up, I quickly I know we're over time, but I think there's one question that looks interesting from the audience that was submitted through the system. So I quickly want to talk about this. Somebody asked, when it comes to Chinese players, how important is customer service to them? How does the quality of customer service affect the loyalty of hyper-casual games? And you can correct me if I'm wrong, if I don't see this correctly. I think it's not very important for hyper-casual. It's nice if your publisher can help you with that, specifically when it comes to organizing organizing like events and stuff like that. But I think it shouldn't be your highest priority when looking for a publisher when it comes to hyper casual games. When it comes to mid-core, it gets extremely important, of course, where you want to have an active community relationship around like events, updates, and so on, active forums and stuff like that. But for hyper casual, you should lean more on the like marketing power side.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with Falko here. Basically, for hyper casual game, it's not much like a customer or community management, and it's very much ads based. And unless there's some bugs, and then you will see it from the game analytics tracking or something like that, and directly from the revenue, you know. And we have, I think most of the publishers should have the team already monitoring every day, right? So if we see some dip, then definitely we are going to go through and check it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. There's less like direct communication channels, so you have to have a look for like ratings and so on.
Right.
All right, but I think that is it for today. How do people get in touch with us? What do you think is the best way?
I think I'm getting a lot of requests from LinkedIn, and which pretty much popular at the West these days, and also that you can also find the related people out there and find the right people out there, right? So I think I'm fine with both. And here you go. We have Falko and my emails out there. Very straightforward. Our name, Falko at JoyPacGames.com and Vivian at JoyPacGames.com. So either way, you know, please feel free to reach out to us and even to have a chat. Nowadays, it's pretty easy, right? So we can just pretty much make online meetings.
That's right, exactly. Yeah, there's another convenient way. Speaking of joypacgames.com, when you go to our website there and you have a specific game in mind that you would like to talk about, there's a submission form for that. There's one general one if you're interested in the Hyperfuel program. So feel free to do that. It helps us a lot because it comes with a lot of information right away. But at the same time, yeah, as Vivian said, just reach out to us directly. We're usually happy to come back to you as fast as we can. And we have a new colleague joining us very soon as well that will help us with that as well.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. I think this is it for today. Thanks everybody for attending. I saw that we were like 70 people here at the peak. If you missed part of the webinar, this whole thing will be online on YouTube for everybody to check out, or if something was too fast for you, feel free to check on our YouTube channel, just JoyPac, in a couple of days, and you'll be able to find all the information there as well.
Yeah, thank you very much for today. And
Yeah,
I
thank you.
see you later.
All right, see you guys. Bye.
Bye.